Good evening and welcome to a special transatlantic edition of the Money Programme. 2,000 of the world's top bankers and finance ministers are gathered here in Washington for the annual meeting of the IMF and the World Bank. Tonight, why the dollar is the most unloved currency in the world. And cable for the super rich, the new television show which is aimed at the most exclusive audience of all time.
And here in Britain, a story of honesty not being its own reward. How an honest businessman found doing his public duty damaged his firm. And a cut-price room at the inn, how you can stay in the best hotels in town at a reduced rate. When Parliament returns next month, the government is expected to announce plans to reform the law on insolvency. It's hoped the proposed changes will make fraud in this area more difficult. Currently, it's hard to detect and harder to prove. And as Luke Casey has been discovering, it's a world where the price of honesty can be a high one.
Amrik Singh Luther has one quality that makes heaven rejoice, but causes him hell on earth. He's an honest man. A devout Sikh and a devoted family man, he's also a lay preacher. His father is a respected elder of his local Sikh temple. Here, at the funeral of Amrik's grandmother, the family demonstrate their sorrow and their faith. And Amrik sings a tribute he's composed with words taken from the Sikh Bible, the Guru Granth. It's in Amrik's other role as a businessman that his honesty has all but ruined him. Under the name of Chase Musicians, he has shops in London, Birmingham and Manchester. He sells musical instruments, mainly organs and synthesizers. The company leapt to prominence in the late 70s. It supplied instruments to many of the country's top bands, including Madness, seen here with one of Amrik's more expensive items. Other famous customers were Queen, Kate Bush, Yes, Cliff Richard, Police and Bad Company. But it was bad company of a different kind that was soon to turn Amrik's world upside down.
Yeah, it was interesting.
His business had been going through a rough patch, but had turned the corner when 2 years ago he was approached in his Manchester shop by this man. He's company liquidator Maurice Sidney Kaplan, otherwise known as Hissing Sid. And he made Amrik the kind of offer that lesser men do not refuse.
Well, basically, Kaplan came and saw me for 2 hours and said, look, this is what we can do for you. I liquidate one of the companies and transfer the assets into the other company, and you will make ginormous profits, they were his words.
Kaplan's plan was simple, but as it emerged in the subsequent court case, it was also fraudulent. Amrik had 2 main companies, Chase Consultants and Chase Musicians. Put most of the debts into consultants, said Kaplan, and most of the stock into musicians. Then liquidate consultants, and the only losers are the creditors. A shrewd man, Mr. Kaplan, but not shrewd enough to notice the rows of accountancy books on the shelf behind Amrik. The Sikh is a qualified accountant in his own right and could see a mile off that the deal was a fraud. He was in no doubt about his next move.
I went to the police and explained them what I felt was going on. They said, okay, at the next meeting when Kaplan rings you, just let us know. And invariably, Mr. Kaplan was ringing me just about every 2 or 3 days.
Amrik invited Mr. Kaplan to his Manchester shop. This time, the police were hidden nearby. With his full cooperation, they'd bugged his office. Amrik got Kaplan to repeat his offer, and the police were able to record every word. There was enough evidence on the tape to bring a case against him. The police had promised Amrik there would be no delay in getting it into court. They realized, as he did, that any long drawn-out proceedings could cripple him financially. The merest whisper of any association with the liquidator would have his creditors squeezing him and his suppliers dropping him like a hot brick.
So the officers said to me, 3 months, and it'll all be over. I'll come up with sort of flying colours out of it, if anything else. So, I mean, I felt that was very important. And I think the officers told me that in good faith.
So how long did it take? Was it all over in 3 months?
Nearly 2 years. And it was the problems within those 2 years that really worried me. Never mind turning a fortune down in the first place. One was lack of credit facilities from creditors. The other problems we had was whenever I was looking for new agencies abroad, at trade shows, perhaps in Chicago or Atlanta or Milan or Frankfurt. The manufacturers who were looking for agents, when they heard that perhaps I was associated with a liquidator in England, and sometimes this information was given to them by my competitors, perhaps, who were also after the agency. And when you are there for 3 days for a trade show, the manufacturer hasn't got half an hour to listen to your story to explain why you're honest. All he knows is you're associated with the liquidator, and he just says, next, please.
Legal delay followed legal delay, and the publicity surrounding the case damaged Amrik's business. The police admitted to us privately that at the time they were furious it was taking so long to get the matter sorted out. Eventually, the case was heard before Manchester Crown Court. Kaplan of Wisborough Green, West Sussex, pleaded guilty to incitement to falsify accounts. He was given a 9 months suspended jail sentence and fined £5,000. At long last, Amrik Singh Luther could hold his head high.
At the end of the case here at Manchester Crown Court, the judge, Judge Hardy, made a special point of thanking Mr. Singh Luther for his help. He said, "I must say the impression I received on reading the papers was that but for Mr. Singh Luther being a man of considerable honour and honesty, he might very well have fallen prey to the temptation that was put in front of him and made what for him would have been a great deal of money." And this was followed very shortly afterwards by another letter of praise from the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester, Mr. James Anderton. Well, at last, the world could see that far from being associated with the likes of hissing Sid Kaplan, Mr. Singh Luther had actually done his public duty and helped to expose him. Surely now, after 2 years of hardship and heartache, his problems were at an end. Not a bit of it.
Debts had mounted up during his 2 years in business limbo. The money he owed the bank, the Inland Revenue, and the VAT man ran into 6 figures. All, naturally, were pressing for payment.
But surely the doors started to open to you again from the banks, from the suppliers.
Well, not really, because when we were strong, you can always walk through a door and get what you want from a bank. When you're weak, try doing it then.
Amrik's family, and especially his father, have wholeheartedly supported his stand, even if it's proved expensive for them too. His father and brother are in the process of remortgaging their homes to raise money so that he can now buy new stock from suppliers for cash and hopefully get his business back on the rails.
Dad's sort of very proud of me, and they are backing me very, very much indeed in this.
He is very proud of you, you say?
That's right, yes.
He's very proud of your honesty and public-spiritedness.
Yes, there's no doubt about that, but certainly he worries as to why I have gone to such extremes, or I've had to go to such extremes to prove it in that sense. Or shall we say, at times he has commented that I've shown my honesty to such an extreme level. Yet no one has come forth with so many assistance.
Well, not quite no one. Just a few days before we arrived in Manchester, Amrik was approached with yet another offer of salvation. It came from a financial Mr. Fix-It, who clearly had no idea of what Amrik had already been through. Amazingly, the deal he was offering sounded more than a little familiar to an incredulous Sikh businessman. A meeting was arranged to explain the deal further. Only this time, our cameras and hidden microphones were there to record the entire conversation.
We'd hidden the camera in the back of a van outside Amrik Singh Luther's office. The man who arrived to sort out his business had, at a previous meeting, introduced himself to Amrik as Steve Miller of Hamilton Financial Consultants of Leamington Spa. We discovered that earlier this year he had changed his name from Bolger to Miller, for reasons that aren't entirely clear. What was clear during a 1.5-hour conversation was that Mr. Miller was offering to solve all of Amrik's problems at a stroke and make him a fortune. He suggested that Amrik liquidate Chase Musicians and, in forming a new company, forget about those creditors whose business would not be important to it.
So from our point of view, who do you have to trade with? You have to trade with...
Well, they're basically the two people, really, I mean, these two.
Right.
They are the only two that I'm just going to the list that I need to.
Well, in that case, I stick to my original premise and I say liquidate it, take those two creditors with you, tell them that those are going to be paid, but you've got to get rid of the VAT.
Mr. Miller's next suggestion was for the new company to buy back almost £460,000 worth of stock for a fraction of that figure.
I think full sale valuation, you're going to get them for 40 or 50,000. Then the day after the creditors meeting, have it on a Friday and you're open for business on Saturday and you've got immediate cash flow, you've cleared the bank and you've just got rid of all the other liabilities except for the two that you make an agreement with the two major creditors. But you've immediately got, at the best, £450,000 worth of stock. At the very worst, and have a sale and sell it as it costs, £278,000. Or say £250,000. There's your working capital. You won't ever need an overdraft.
Having recorded all of Mr. Miller's suggestions for saving Amrik's company, we decided to confront him and ask him to explain them. Excuse me, Mr. Miller?
Yeah.
We're from BBC Television's Money programme. We've been recording your interview with Mr. Luther and we're recording this interview with you now.
Yeah.
May we ask you why you've encouraged him to break the law with a phony liquidation deal?
Because, first of all, it's not a phony liquidation deal. And
You've
secondly,
encouraged him to
he's not
defraud his creditors, have you not?
breaking- No, I have not.
You've offered him nearly £500,000 worth of his own stock back for a nominal £40,000. Don't you think that's defrauding creditors?
No, because I haven't offered him anything at all.
Well, we have you on tape.
Yes, that's
Every
right.
word you said.
That's right.
Yeah. What do you mean by Mr. Miller continued to deny that he had made any improper suggestions. That, of course, will be up to the police, to whom we will be giving a copy of our recording. When Mr. Miller departed, apparently cheerfully convinced of the integrity of his business methods, a bemused Amrik was left to reflect on the meeting.
Having dealt already with Mr. Kaplan, how familiar was the deal that Mr. Miller offered you?
Well, it was, I felt along the same lines. It was a quick, overnight, ginormous profit, winning the pools for the second time. People don't win the pools once in their life. I seem to be winning them too often.
Many people will say that he's mad, that he should have taken the money and to hell with his creditors. All he's succeeded in proving is that honesty certainly does not pay. But Amrik Singh Luther simply isn't that kind of man. The words of the Sikh martyr Bhindranwale probably say more than anything else exactly why.
On Friday, Ronald Reagan meets Andrei Gromyko. Top-level contacts between the two superpowers have been few and far between in recent years. But one remarkable businessman has managed to remain equally welcome at the White House and the Kremlin. He's Dr. Armand Hammer, chairman of Occidental Petroleum. He arrived in London last week for James Capel's conference to mark the 20th birthday of the North Sea oil industry. And Nick Clark went to talk to him about his two great interests, oil and doing business with the Russians.
Heathrow Airport, Sunday afternoon, with commercial flights arriving from all over the world. Among them, however, a Boeing 727 slips into position near Terminal 3, call sign November 10 X-Ray Yankee, Oxy 1 to its friends. It's come from Los Angeles via Geneva. Its next destination will be Tel Aviv. But you won't find any of these flights in the airline schedules. Oxy's aim in life is to carry around in consummate comfort an 86-year-old man, his wife and entourage. These are no pleasure flights. For Dr. Armand Hammer, oil man extraordinary, business is like breathing for the rest of us. He thrives on it. That and the friendship of the world's most powerful men and women. He's turned name-dropping into a transcendental art form.
I enjoy my work. I look forward to every day, the work I have to do, and the challenges I face. It's a great outlet for my energy, it stirs my imagination, and it's a great thrill when I'm able to accomplish things.
It's not just Hammer's position as chairman of Occidental Petroleum, sales last year $20 billion, that opens the doors of world leaders. What they're acknowledging is one of the most extraordinary business careers of all time. A career that has never looked back from the time 63 years ago when the young Hammer, of Russian stock himself, got to know a certain Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. With Lenin's help, he arranged in 1921 the barter of desperately needed grain for Russian furs, hides and other goods. In so doing, he became the first, and for a long time the only, capitalist in revolutionary Russia. He mined asbestos, built a pencil factory and sold Ford cars. He made a fortune and built up relationships which have thrived to this day. Actually, Armand Hammer had already made $1 million before traveling to Russia in 1921 by cornering the market in an alcohol substitute during Prohibition. He went on later to clean up in whiskey, cattle and fine art. By 1956, he was on the point of retiring when he was persuaded to lend money to the tiny, struggling Occidental oil outfit in California. That launched the second phase of his incredible business life. He struck oil in the States, in Libya, in the North Sea, in Colombia and Peru, and he still found time to set up one of the biggest East-West commercial deals of all time, a $20 billion swap of Russian ammonia for Western fertilizers. Armand Hammer believes such contacts must not fall foul of political disagreements, like the Afghanistan invasion, on which he has strong views.
I think at that time, the Russians really wanted to pull out of Afghanistan. And I think that if the countries surrounding Afghanistan had agreed to guarantee that there would be a government in Afghanistan that would not be anti-Soviet, I think the Russians would have pulled out. But I don't think they could afford to have an enemy country on their southern border. As Brezhnev said to me, we have China on the east and we have NATO on the west, and now there'll be another hostile government set up on our southern border.
With a unique and immaculate sense of balance, Armand Hammer has managed to remain steadfast on the political tightrope that divides communist and capitalist.
Know Mr. Chernenko. I think he is a warm-hearted man. I think he is more in the mold of Brezhnev. If we can get Mr. Reagan and Mr. Chernenko to meet each other.
Even though Mr. Reagan, who is an avowed enemy of communism.
Well, I know, but I think he'll find that he doesn't have to buy communism in order to reach an understanding that the two countries should live in peace and that the two systems should compete with each other, not militarily, but economically. And I think the capitalist system, with all its faults, will outperform the communist system, and that's history then will find a compromise somewhere between socialism and capitalism, which I think will help us to find a way to have peace between the East and the West. And I hope to play a role in that, and I'll do all I can to try to bring these two men together.
Oil still absorbs much of Hammer's